Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Uncaped Mama podcast, where I help you shed the superwoman persona and just be. As a mama, as a woman, as a friend, as a supporter of mamas, this is just your place to exist. So thank you for joining me. I am Dom Gonzalez, and I am your host. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. I know it's been a minute since I have had an episode. I'm back. I never left, but I had every intention on recording last week and actually ended up losing my voice because of allergies. And so we are back. It is June. This podcast has been going for several months now, and I wanted to talk about something that I've been dealing with since the beginning of parenting. And I know that I am not alone in this topic. And I have had a change of, perception and a just like better understanding. And this may end up turning into a series. But this topic is co-parenting. So let's dig into co-parenting. 3 years ago, around this time, I was thankfully entering my second trimester of my first pregnancy, so with my son, and I was single. I was never intending to be single or a single parent or going down that journey. The relationship ended very shortly after I found out I was pregnant and made the decision to try to co-parent. And so I did a lot of healing. I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of shadow work. I did a lot of journaling, a lot of crying, a lot of just like hanging around other parents and married couples and people with children, and just also like going down the journey of having hyperemesis gravidarum and gestational diabetes and polyhydramnios and just so many things. Eventually preeclampsia twice, specifically severe preeclampsia before and after delivery, and just had a lot like happening to me and around me. Not to mention we were still in the middle of a pandemic in 2021. So there was a lot happening, and to try to understand co-parenting when I hadn't intimately seen how that worked was a ride. I knew that my children deserved two parents and godparents and a village, whoever wanted to be there. And so for me, I didn't want to make that difficult. And so I did my best on the journey to try to explain everything that was, going on and share the journey and all those sorts of things. And it was rocky. And I think that he would tell you it was rocky. Lots of miscommunication, lots of, maybe fear around becoming parents, a lot of anxiety, not to mention all of the things that come with hormones and things in the woman's body and this baby growing inside of my body. And so just like mental things and spiritual things, and my body hurts and all the stuff you have to try to figure out, right? And also trying to figure out co-parenting when you hadn't really seen it. And everyone has their different thoughts and opinions, and you could look at all kinds of resources. And at the end of the day, you have to do what works for y'all, right? This is what I know now, 3 years later. And so went down that journey, and the way in which it started after my first child was born, it was rocky. And I'm like, I'm doing my best here. I think I'm doing my best. I know I'm trying to do my best. And it didn't work. It ended in me blocking him and us not having any communication in lots of things, right? And me just sort of moving on, and in the back of my mind saying, when he apologizes or something, like, and we can get to a place of co-parenting, that is the best situation for my child. But I don't know how to do that because I feel hurt and I feel harmed. And my number one thing and thinking about my children is the protection of them, right? No doubt about the love that he had for his son, and his family is awesome. And, everybody was just so excited and supportive. But because of my own traumas and my own fears and my own experience, I essentially maybe created a story or a narrative in my mind that made me even more afraid. And so I couldn't move past it to understand, how do we co-parent? I couldn't figure out how to communicate without miscommunicating. And I'm a person who often feels misunderstood when I'm communicating anyway. And so trying to communicate about a child, about what's happening with me, about, trying to have boundaries, just trying to figure out schedules. I mean, y'all, if you're a parent, you get it, right? When you know, you know. And so it was a lot going on, a lot to juggle. And about a year ago, I started to really pray about it, and felt we need to open the door again. And I was afraid. I don't know how to do that. And I blocked them, and I'm like, so I unblock him, and then I'm like, I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to start this. But I think energetically, I'm sure he would say he knew, maybe even before then, right? That he realized we got to figure out how to make this co-parenting thing work. But we weren't talking to each other about it. I wasn't talking to anybody about it but God. In my journal, I would talk about it in therapy because I really understood that there was something internal going on with me that I needed to process so that I could get that out of the way of this relationship that is ultimately my son and his father's. So December, he reached out from a different phone number, and we had a good conversation, and I gave him updates. It was all, a text message conversation, and then very quickly just went into this legal custody conservatorship situation in Texas that is wild. And maybe someday I will go into the details of that. I don't know that will be a podcast episode. That might have to be some other way for me to share that information, because ultimately I think that both of us want to probably support parents who went through what we went through. And we, neither of us were aware of what was going on. And so, and that recently happened a couple weeks ago. We went through mediation, and started supervised visits. And I'll tell you the good news now. They're going great. Communication is great. Everything that I feared, is no longer a fear. We understand that it will take time for a transition to unsupervised visits and longer stints and all that. But we are able to communicate about that in a very healthy way with laughter and, and focus on our son. And so I say all that to say this. When you're thinking about co-parenting, consider your child. Now, I am not telling y'all to force any harmful situations, right? Where there was some sort of violence or severe neglect or anything. I'm not pushing you to do that. But if there's willingness from both sides, I know that as a child of a man who chose not to have anything to do with me, did not want to, I didn't care about money or any of that. Would that have helped? Yeah, because it certainly takes money to raise a child. A lot of it, right? Especially now. And of course, it always has. But I didn't want money. I wanted time. I wanted a relationship. And ultimately, that's really what I think people desire. You want a connection, right? To the person who you're genetically linked to, right? Who maybe you look like, you've got similar features. Maybe you got similar mannerisms. Maybe you got similar interests. And even if you don't, that is still your biological parent. And so everybody ultimately wants to know about them and have a connection. And so for me, I thought, man, if that's what I desired and still am open to it, right? I am almost 40. I will be 40 in a few months. I am still open to, if my biological father said, let's try it. I would be down. Would I be cautious? Yes. Would I have boundaries? Absolutely. Would there need to be consistency and all that? Yes. Right. But I would be open for it. And I knew at 39 and a half years old, if I still desire that, I don't want that for my son. And I certainly don't want that for his biological father, who actually does want a relationship, who actually can, like, we were able to admit where things fell short or the lines were getting crossed, or where we were actually being manipulated by people who work in the legal system. And we realized, man, if we didn't have our own biases or our own thoughts or our own fears or our own traumas or whatever that were sort of in the mix of this, we probably could have saved a whole lot of time and money and just sat down and had dinner one day and figured all this out. So if you're on the co-parenting journey, I get it. I understand it. I know that it can be difficult. I know that there are challenges. I know that there's a lot to juggle, especially when you think about the legal system. I know every situation is different. And I'm saying, based on your situation, if there's willingness from both sides, try to move forward. Try to communicate clearly enough where you think about what your child needs. And if that means that, you know, you're meeting in public places for short stints of time frequently, right? So that the child can develop this frequency of seeing their other parent and that sort of thing, then do it. If it means whatever it means, figuring that out. If you need to feel safe and secure and make sure your child is protected, which I know that is obviously number one, state that. Say that. If you know you're afraid of something, say that. Like, I was able to say that. Like, my number one concern is just that my child is going to be safe and protected. I know I cannot be everywhere with him for the rest of his life, but I feel like my number one job is to make sure he's safe and protected as best as I can. And that was number one. The rest of it, I'm like, as long as I'm comfortable and confident in that, the rest of this I know can get figured out. It's just going to take two people co-parenting, or a village, right? Like, if there are other parties involved, right? Like, I'm engaged and he's married, then everybody, right, needs to be on the same page. And then your other support systems as well have to let you handle it. And I remember he used to say, no, this is between me and you, Dom, about our son. Don't let anybody else get in the middle of it. And I used to think this is a control thing, right? This is trauma speaking. He's trying to control me. He's trying to tell me how to handle this. Like, I can involve other people in my support system to help me, to protect me, to whatever. But I realized at the end of the day, actually, spot on. That was not a lie. He is 100%, like, that's factual. If it's not him and the step parents, right? Like, if it's not the parents, everybody else's opinion and everybody else's thoughts is just that. We have got to figure out what works best for our child, the child we created, the child that God blessed us with, to be parents to. So this is just part one of some recent co-parenting reflections. All is well. I did not think I would be here. If you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I was terrified, stressed out, terrified, crying, like, just deep in it. If you talk to my therapist, she could tell you, like, I've been in the trenches trying to work on it and recognizing there's something in there, there's something in there, and it's something in me that I have to work on, because whatever is in me is creating this blockage for my child, and that's not fair. And also recognizing I don't know the ins and outs of family law, so I don't really know how to move. Like, I don't know what I can and can't do, and all of these things. And so that's always in the back of my mind as a person with anxiety who overthinks, who's had a pretty challenging year just personally, right? All of that going on made it unnecessarily difficult. And I am extremely grateful to God and to my ancestors and to him and his wife, right? like that we've been able to figure this out. A very scary like situation and journey for me is turning out to be just fine. So I wish that for everyone. I know that I'm not alone in that. I even talked to my therapist about it and said I can think of probably about 4 different women who have healthy co-parenting relationships with people who they did not necessarily either have a good relationship with, or it was a bad breakup or a bad marriage, or, or it just ended and they weren't expecting it, right? And there was animosity maybe, and there was fears, and there was tension and all that sort of thing. Multiple people who've been able to say, oh no, we're good now. And I reflected in my healing over the last year on those. And I've had specific people in my life say, Dom, like, you have to focus on your child. And I know I'm not invalidating your hurt or anything like that, right? And your fear, not invalidating that at all. But you have to remember, the person at the end of the day who's going to be hurt the most is your child, is y'all's child. You know what that feels like. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. So having those examples of people who are like, oh yeah, we may have had a bad breakup or a bad marriage, but like, that's, that's my dog. Like that person's funny and we hang out and our families do stuff together and whatever, right? And you see the other side of that. I thought today that was a message to share, that in a world where a lot of what we hear about is bad situations where people don't want to parent, or, everyone says it's just going to be super difficult. And I'm not saying it's easy. There will be challenges, right? We're going to do our best. But it doesn't have to be terrifying. It doesn't have to be bad, especially when there's willingness and there's understanding and there's maturity and there's growth and there's healing in the mix. And I am grateful eternally that is present now. I pray it continues. I pray that we are able to work through challenges and continue to be a positive example for what it's like to have a healthy co-parenting relationship with bonus parents involved, with other siblings involved as well, on both sides. And I hope that we can just be that, and not publicly. I'm not finna tell y'all his name, and we're not finna do all that, right? Like, I'm not doing all that unless they want to come on the podcast one day down the line. But I think we need more examples, and more examples highlighted of how this can actually work out for the good of the child and for the good of everyone. And there's some healing that can happen throughout this. So that's that. Y'all let me know what you think on this topic. If you want to hear more about it, you can email me, uncapedmama@gmail.com. You can also follow on YouTube. I have a YouTube page now, so this podcast episode will actually end up on there, and I will eventually have video recordings. You can also follow on Instagram, uncapedmama. You can message me there. I hope that this was insightful. I hope that if you're in a person who's been in the place where I've been, where there's at least willingness, that this sort of opens your eyes. And honestly, if y'all have questions about mediation and the legal stuff, please reach out to me one-on-one. So, I feel like I want my next job truly to be going to law school so I can be an advocate in family law for people. And I almost feel like me and him, we could probably figure out how to do that together, because we learned a lot in that situation that we actually want other people to avoid if they happen to be in a situation that's just sort of similar to ours, where, things just sort of ended and there was no communication, and something happened. There's way less communication, and each person has done some individual healing work, but we don't know that, right? I can only speak for myself. I would love to just give people insight on that situation. So there's that. If you know somebody who is co-parenting, send them love. If you see people who are co-parenting and they're doing it amazingly, shout them out. There are people who need to see that. They need to hear it. They need to know that it can work out. And I will continue to check back in on this topic as time goes on, because I just think it's really important. So, all right, I'll talk to y'all next time. Happy co-parenting. Thank you for tuning in to the Uncaped Mama podcast. Follow me on social media on Instagram, Uncaped Mama and care_Bath and Body. I hope that you found this episode inspiring, relatable, and impactful. And I hope that this triggers a thought in you to be a better support system to a mama near you. Help her to put down the superwoman persona, to put her cape down, to be whole, to be all that she is destined to be as a mother and more. See you next time.